Hey guys, this is the baby Banter. I've had this knife for over 2 months. It was December of last year that I got the knife. That's also when I made the video about it. And ever since then, I think I've sharpened the knife about 5 or 6 times. That means a complete sharpening. I removed the apex, I formed a new apex. I have carried the knife quite a bit. Comparing it to the other knives which I have in this size category, the Dragonfly and the Bird Robin 2, I have never carried those so much, and I've tested the knife quite a bit. And this also kind of led me to testing the other small knives that I have. You can find, I think, 1 or 2 of those tests on my Patreon page, should you care. And in this video, I'm going to tell you what my opinions on the knife are after these 2+ months. But first, why did I get the knife? Well, I bought the knife because I thought it was interesting. I think the designer, Ben, is genuinely a nice guy, and he created the Banter, which I didn't get, but the baby Banter I thought was a better design from my point of view, because it is a small knife, which is atypical for me, but it has this finger choil, and you need a finger choil for such a small knife. The blade makes sense, and it is at a reasonable price, I would say. Now, the second reason might be odd. I bought the knife because so many people said Nitro V was not a good steel, and it was a poor choice for this knife. That actually got me to being very curious about it, because now, I've played around with a lot of crappy knives, and one thing that I like to do with those knives is reduce the edge angle. So far, until for regular tasks, just cutting a small piece of wood, you will warp the edge. And that was what I wanted to do. When I got the knife, held it in my hand, and I was immediately surprised by how comfortable it felt, and it does. I put my index finger in the choil here, then cut the knife in my hand, and it just felt right. Immediately after the first video I made, I sharpened the knife. I dropped the edge angle down to 15 degrees per side, and I started cutting wood, cardboard, and sisal rope. And immediately, the edge bent, the apex. I could see it in the light. It was dull. I removed the whole apex, sharpened it again, and I did a few more cuts. This time it seemed to be better, but I still got dull spots. So I said, okay, let's go all in, and I dropped the edge angle to 13 degrees per side. And that's where it is now. Just so you get an impression of what that means, you lay the right here, it starts cutting. If you see there on the blade, you'll see the tape from the back of the strop. So you have to raise it about this much for it to cut into this tape. So it is a rather small edge angle. Now, K390 had no issues with 13 degrees per side. In fact, this knife is now at about a little bit under 13 degrees per side. This is Nitro V, and I don't know if anybody else took it this far, but for the past, I think the first steps happened within the first 2 weeks. For the past 1.5 months, it's been at 13 degrees per side, and I've sharpened it 3 times since then. I've used it to cut a lot of dry wood. This is softer dry wood. This is a bit harder. Used it to do a few cardboard and sisal rope cut tests, and I figured out a lot of things about it. Now, the knife is very fidget friendly. It moves on bearings. It doesn't have a lot of detent, so if you actually try, you can shake it out of the handle, but it being such a small knife, it's not the easiest thing to do. Action is great though. The thumb stud, I just felt from the beginning that it was a bit too big. Now, it makes sense, because most people who will have such a small knife, they will use it to fidget. It runs on bearings, and that makes it very fidget friendly. And you can just, like you've just seen, you can open the knife with your thumb, with any finger, and you can even do the drop. It works perfectly. When I started realizing that the thumb stud got in the way was the first time I did a sisal rope cut test. I got some sisal rope and choked up on the knife and started cutting. And as the edge dulled immediately, I had to use more and more pressure. And then I realized the thumb stud is biting into my finger right here and into my thumb. At that point, I also felt the jimping a bit, but I never felt the thumb stud more than with the sisal rope cut test. So I said, okay, it's going to get in the way of sharpening. It doesn't really get in the way of cutting. If you're cutting cardboard, you're going to have to do more of a push cut like this because there's not a lot of blade here. Still, you're going to have to hold it in this hand position. And however you want to hold it, if you want to choke up a bit on it, the thumb stud will get in the way. If you want a full grip on the handle like this, still the thumb stud touches you. I understand that you need a thumb stud, and if you don't care about this, then it's fine for you. For me, the choice was very obvious. I had to take it down, and from what I understand, you void the warranty if you remove the thumb stud. I don't care because the knife feels so much better without the thumb stud. Now, this jimping is a bit aggressive. It's not that aggressive that it would break the skin. If it would, I would have rounded it off, but you can. I found, I'm not a friend of jimping. I don't like jimping, but in this case, it was okay. The jimping here in the choil didn't bother me that much. But now, just holding the knife like this, it's a completely different knife. It loses a bit of that fidget factor, but as you can see, you can still open it because it moves on bearings. The detent is not very strong, and if you want to do this, the spidey drop, you can. Now, I also removed the pocket clip for a while. That wasn't such a good idea because the detent is so weak. I really didn't trust it in my pocket. I usually keep secondary knives with which I play in the pocket of my hoodie around the house. And just putting this in my pocket, I didn't feel comfortable. So I put the pocket clip back on, and for such a small knife, I can't really say if it was ever uncomfortable. Now, if you want to find out if a knife is going to create hot spots, be uncomfortable for you, all you have to do is take a piece of wood. The harder, the better. This is something a bit harder than hazel. This is dogwood. And just start doing cuts, repetitive cuts, one after the other. Now, this is very hard wood. And the nice thing about this knife is, even if it's such a small knife, people will say, well, this is a light task knife. And some people will misunderstand that as in this knife cannot handle bigger tasks. I think it can. This is, like I said, a piece of dogwood. And now I'm putting a lot of force behind this cut. And what does it mean? It can handle those harder tasks, but you don't want to do it. Why? Because it has such a small handle. And if you pair that up with a thick grind and an obtuse edge angle, it's just going to be torture on your hand. But one thing that Civivi does very well, and I learned that from the Elementum, is they put this one has a very nice hollow ground blade, which is also ends up being very thin. They do put thin grinds on their knives. And if you pair a thin grind with a small edge angle, you're going to get a great performing tool. Now, can you deform that edge? Can you deform the whole blade if you take it too thin? Of course. But I think it would be in everyone's interest to learn how to properly use their knives, do nice push cuts or a nice, very controlled slice cut. And then to see, okay, the knife did not take any damage, I will reduce the edge angle further. That's what I did. I took it down to 15 degrees per side and then to 13 degrees per side. And after, I think, about the fourth sharpening, there was no significant damage. All the damage that occurred up until then, even up until then, was at the apex, the very apex. So I said, if I'm just going to be a bit more careful with sharpening, I might be successful. And I was. I haven't sharpened the knife on stones for the past maybe 3 weeks, and I have been using it. Now, if you look into the light, you can see very small spots reflecting or being dark, depending on which side you look at. But those are not chips. If they would be chips, you would feel it when you would cut a thin piece of paper. They're more likely small bends. The knife shaves because I stropped it, I think, yesterday. I did cut for about half an hour. I cut a stick like this just to see, hey, will it hold? I didn't do that for a while, so it does take off hair. Well, you can see the bald spot probably. You get a nice clean cut in a piece of paper. And for such steels like Nitro V, you can definitely use a classic leather strop with this is the White Bark River compound, but any classic wax-based stropping compound will probably work, especially if you lower the edge angle. For comfort in hand, I think this knife does great. Now, I did notice something as I was, I do like chip carving, and I like to carve in wood. I'm not very good at it, but I like to do it. And I use such small knives very often, and this is why I started initially reducing edge angles to use such knives in carving. And I also have this old timer, which is not a very good choice for a chip carving knife, but at some point I had to have it. So I do like to do chip carving, and I like to do regular carving in bigger pieces of wood. And as such, I want to know how far can I push the edge. So took a piece of wood like this, maybe it was a bit harder than this, and I started removing material like this in my hand. And you can hear it. I'm trying to put a radius here when I am actually lifting the edge off the wood. Now, you would do something like this, or bite into a piece of wood and twist it when you want to see how far can you push it. Normally, you wouldn't do this. I think everybody can understand that. But I did this, and I did it for a while just to see if the tip would take any damage, and no damage there. I mean, you can even push a bit harder here, and nothing of the sort will happen. So Nitro V is not as fragile or as bad as some people will say. My impression of this would be, give it some time. Put it through a few sharpening steps. Sharpen it, I don't know, I've sharpened this knife about 5 or 6 times. Like I said, remove the whole apex and reform the apex. And now it handles itself pretty well. At 13 degrees per side, all the damage it takes is right there on the apex. You can't see it with your naked eye. You can only see the light reflect into it. And this would be a good opportunity to start using micro bevels. If you would put a 2 degree per side micro bevel or a 5 degree per side micro bevel, you would raise the edge angle at 18 degrees per side, but you would keep most of the performance of this 13 degree per side edge angle, which is a very nice thing to play around with. Now, right now, behind this edge, and I don't know exactly how wide the edge is, about maybe a millimeter, 1.3, 1.4 millimeters, 1.5 millimeters. It is 0.35 millimeters thick. That is about 14 thousandths of an inch thick. That is good for 13 degrees per side. That is very good. This is a performer, and I got a bit sidetracked here. What happened here, it took no chips, but as I kept doing this over and over again, I was standing up, maybe my hand position was different, and with my middle finger, I released the liner lock. This is something that, and I felt it in my finger like this, that, hey, the blade has been released. Played a bit. Now, this never happened to me with this knife or with any other knife before. Not by accident. On purpose, I think I can do it. It's not really a big issue to just put your finger in here and pull on the liner lock. But it's never happened to me by accident, and I kept wondering when I was using the Bradley, Was it really necessary to not have that cutout for the liner lock? Because honestly, I enjoy such a design like this one has. The Sokoki doesn't have a very big cutout for the liner lock, and the handle just feels better in hand. Now, this being a smaller knife, it feels very good in hand, but you can see how much of the liner is exposed. This was one situation when this happened. It hasn't happened since. I've tried to reproduce it. I did the same motions over and over again, and I couldn't. So food for thought. But I don't think most people will use it like this. And if you do, there's hardly a chance for you to cut yourself, because you would have to go to be very far behind on a handle and then unlock it so that the blade would cut you. If you're even here, the choil will hit your thumb, your index finger, and it won't cut you. So something happened, but in the end, it wasn't really a problem. I would really like to see this in a better steel, not because I have anything against Nitro V. I think I said this in the initial video. If it handles itself like HCR 13 MOV, it's okay for me, because I can lower the edge angle and start playing with micro bevels. And the lower the edge angle, the quicker you will be able to maintain it on even the most inexpensive of sharpening stones. Something like this, I think it was $2.60 off a Chinese site, has a diamond side, has a ceramic side, which does cut very well. And if you have a steel like this, Nitro V or D2 or even S30V with a very low edge angle, you will be able to mend that edge with this $2 ceramic diamond stone, which you can keep in your pocket. This is a very great advantage. And Nitro V, as far as I was able to tell so far, it's pretty good. The design I like. I haven't had the Banter. I had my eye on the big Banter, but it is a bit pricey. But this one is fantastic, especially from my point of view. And I'm not a big fan of small knives. I think they're interesting, and I think they can teach you a thing or two. This is how I keep it, like I said, without the thumb stud, and it just works great. And the micarta is fantastic. If you like micarta, I'm sure that you will like this handle. And you know, the Chevalier has good micarta. This is better. The Sokoki is very plasticky. Feels actually a bit worse than the micarta on the Elementum. This is the one bad part about the Sokoki, the quality of the micarta. This one, if I had to wish for something, I would wish that they would have used T8 screws for the pocket clip, because I'm not going to remove the pocket clip. No other problems. I don't mind the weak detent. It's okay. It's perfect. It's very fidgety. It's a small knife. But if they would have used T8 screws all around, it would have made life so much easier. And I think yes, for the custom clip, if you get a custom clip from Civivi, you get T8s with it. And I don't know if this one fits it. It just doesn't feel right. But yeah, that would be something I would wish. And of course, the lanyard hole. Plug it up. I don't like the way it looks. It doesn't really bother me, but if I would have to actually complain about the knife, the spine is very well, it has the corners. It's not chamfered. It doesn't have a swedge, but you can put your thumb on the spine and it won't bother you. And the jimping, who knows, in the future I might get some sandpaper and just knock off the corners. But for now, in positions like this, I did about 100 cuts. I have the at 13 degrees per side, 100 cuts in scissor rope, and I got some deformation of the edge. But I did about 100 cuts like this, and it didn't really bother me. So it's very well made. I know this is not a knife for everybody. It's a small knife. Doesn't make sense for anybody. I really enjoyed it. If I were to choose between this, my Dragonfly, I would choose this. I think it's more fun to play with and work with, especially because it has a thinner grind. Like I said, right now, 13 degrees per side, about 0.35 millimeters behind the edge. It's a very, very good slicing tool. And you can get a decent grip on it. That is something that you need to remember. With the Dragonfly, my grip is not so comfortable. The Robin 2 is a bit better there. And especially if you want to put your finger on the spine, this jimping does help keep your finger in there, and it's not as aggressive that it would bother you severely. If I had my choice, yeah, I would say no jimping. But yeah, that is it, I think. I think I covered everything. I got the knife because I was curious about it. I was curious about Nitro V, not necessarily how it behaves. I have other more interesting steels to look at, but everybody kept complaining about it. And I said, I think if I would do that, if I would reduce the edge angle and start playing around with it, I would have a result with which I was happy. And I am very happy with this result. Oh, and by the way, I took the thumb stud off, but the thumb stud, I think I mentioned this, does not get in the way of cutting. It might get in the way of sharpening if you use a guided sharpening system, but it does not get in the way of cutting. So just to mention that, I'm a big fan of this knife. I'm a big fan of this knife, and I think there was a lot of thought put into this knife. And from my understanding, when they switched to the micarta handle scale, they also did a lot of testing. So there you go. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's something I didn't mention and you are curious about, let me know. I know this was a long video and this might have been very boring for a lot of people, but if you're looking to spend, I don't know, $50, $60, whatever this costs right now, I think this video might actually be of some use for you and you deciding whether you want to or not. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And as always, have a great day.